The greatest misconception about inner strength is that it's built in safety. I will tell you a shocking truth, a testable claim rooted in the most enduring philosophy of the West. The deepest spiritual awakening, the one that makes your character truly unbreakable, is not granted. It is forged under the crushing, isolating pressure of family trauma. By the end of this hour, you will not only understand this principle, but you will possess the mental architecture to transform inherited pain not into a lifelong wound, but into the very foundation of your unconquerable self. The question we must answer, however, is this. When the world's most toxic environment is your own home, how do you learn to trust the gravity of your own soul? Hold that thought, for we must first clear the ground. Let me be clear. What we discuss here is philosophy, a training for the mind and the soul. It is not a substitute for medical care, psychological counseling, or legal advice. Reflect on these ancient ideas and apply them to your life with prudence, consulting qualified professionals for specific challenges. We seek to understand the human condition, not to offer personalized directives or miraculous cures. Our aim is simply to offer a new lens through which to view your experience. The Stoics knew this. Most human suffering comes from misidentifying what is truly yours. We constantly reach for things outside the perimeter of our will, our proheresis, and then are shocked when these things, wealth, reputation, other people's approval, inevitably fail us. But a stronger, more subtle suffering emerges when the environment itself is the source of the chaos. When the very people who are meant to be your secure harbor are instead a churning storm of instability, conditional love, and emotional dishonesty. Where do you drop anchor? The dysfunctional family, in a cruel irony, becomes the ultimate training forge for the soul. Ancient teachers like Epictetus understood that the universe provides the perfect circumstance for our training in virtue. The modern mind sees a childhood of emotional neglect or manipulation as an unfair burden, and it is. But the Stoic mind is trained to ask a different question. Since this event is outside my control, what quality of character, what inner resource, is it demanding that I build right now? The sensitive, spiritually attuned child, often labeled the dramatic one or the truth teller, is simply the one who refuses to participate in the collective illusion. They are forced into a state of hyper-awareness, a vigilant scrutiny of reality, because survival depends on it. While others are permitted to sleepwalk through inherited patterns, this individual is awake, an unwelcome sentinel in the system. This early forced awakening is the preparatory isolation that creates the philosopher, the artist, the boundary setter. It is a grueling, involuntary education in discernment. The common, unexamined life is a preventable downfall. I think of a man I will call Aurelius, who inherited a family business and a family pathology in equal measure. His father was a charismatic tyrant, one who demanded absolute loyalty and defined love only as unquestioning service. Aurelius, naturally empathetic, found himself managing the business chaos, but more crucially, managing his father's emotional instability. He was the perfect son, successful, available, and miserable. Aurelius believed the Stoic principle of duty meant perpetual self-sacrifice to the family unit. Even when that unit was corrupting his own moral fiber, he never learned to separate the role logs of son and manager from the self-hunt of Aurelius. The downfall wasn't financial, it was a total collapse of his inner life. He had built a vast, intricate manor, but its foundations were in sand, utterly dependent on his father's approval and the illusion of family peace. The ruin was complete when his father, in a fit of pique over a minor business decision, publicly disowned him. Elias was left adrift, not because the business was gone, but because he had outsourced his entire self-worth to his performance within a broken system. His error was in failing to recognize that the only duty that matters is the duty to your own moral will, your proheresis. You must distinguish between the sphere of your rightful action and the sphere of another's faulty judgment. The sensitive soul, cast out emotionally as the black sheep, is not being punished. They are being given a higher sacred task. This individual becomes the carrier of the whole family shadow. In Jungian terms, this is the unconscious, denied, and disowned aspects, the secrets, the hypocrisy, the unacknowledged trauma that the collective system refuses to look at. By projecting all this onto the outsider, the family attempts to maintain a fragile, false stability. But here is the magnificent consequence. The one who carries the shadow is the one who, by necessity, has the clearest vision of it. They become the first link in the generational chain capable of seeing the pattern and therefore breaking it. The journey out of the family shadow is where Stoicism offers its most surgical instruments. You begin with the dichotomy of control. What is up to me and what is not? In a toxic environment, the only thing truly up to you is the quality of your inner response. You cannot control the manipulation, the gaslighting, or the lack of apology, but you absolutely control whether or not you consent to their judgment of you. Do you accept the title they impose, dramatical, too much, disloyal, or do you withdraw your assent? The act of withholding your consent from their false narrative is the first and most powerful declaration of your sovereignty. This leads to a delayed awakening, a moment that often arrives much later, only after the damage is done. I recall the story of Helena, who spent her youth trying to earn the love of a cold, perpetually dissatisfied mother. Helena was highly successful, yet every achievement was met with a sigh, a slight correction, or a redirect to her perceived failures. Her awakening didn't come in a sudden revelation, but after a decade of self-harm in the form of overwork and self-neglect. It was the moment she looked in the mirror, not to scrutinize her appearance, but to examine her exhaustion, that she asked herself a simple, brutal question. Am I acting out of virtue, or am I acting out of a desperate hope that can never be realized? That question, a true Stoic practice of self-examination, opened a deep wound, but it also became the entry point to a transformation. She realized she had been confusing external validation with inner worth. The hard lesson was this: the love you are owed is the one you must now give yourself. The time she had spent chasing a ghost was the time she now had to cultivate her own inner fortress. The fortress is the great metaphor of Marcus Aurelius. It is your inner citadel, a place of peace and unassailable clarity. You build it brick by brick, not through meditation alone, but through the hard labor of ethical action. When you begin to say no to the family's demands, not out of hate, but out of clarity, regarding your own virtue, you are laying a foundation. Boundaries are not acts of rebellion. They are the architecture of selfhood. They define the perimeter of your fortress, communicating to the world where your moral jurisdiction ends and another's begins. The toxic system will interpret this clarity as betrayal, labeling it disloyalty or selfishness, because they have lost a source of energy. But you must distinguish between their projections and your principles. You are not turning away from love. You are turning toward integrity. This is the point of credible transformation, when the burden of pain is consciously transformed into the weight of purpose. Consider the journey of Javier. Raised in a poverty of spirit where emotional outbursts were the currency of communication, Javier began his adult life repeating the same destructive patterns. He was quick to anger, fearful of intimacy, and sabotaged every success. He sought Stoicism not for peace, but for control, a common misconception. But the philosophy taught him something deeper. It taught him the practice of voluntary discomfort, the training in resilience. He started small, enduring a freezing morning shower to train his will against mere sensation. Then he escalated, enduring the discomfort of non-reaction. When a family member launched a verbal assault, he didn't just walk away, he stayed, listened to the noise, and practiced the most difficult task of all, seeing the other person not as an antagonist, but as a deeply conditioned, unhappy agent whose actions were out of his control. He learned the wisdom of Seneca, that our perception of the offense is often more damaging than the offense itself. Javier's transformation was credible because it was physical, mental, and ethical. He became the architect of his own emotional scaffolding. He broke the pattern not through an emotional explosion, but through a disciplined silence and a quiet, internal, "I do not consent to this." His former sensitivity became his discernment, and his past vigilance became his wisdom. Now, let's return to the question we opened with. When the world's most toxic environment is your own home, how do you learn to trust the gravity of your own soul? The answer lies in the concept of the inner demon, your authentic self, which the Stoics believed was the divine fragment placed within you. The family system attempts to replace this inner gravity with the fickle weight of their approval. The trauma, the emotional exile you endured, was simply the universe forcing you to seek a heavier, more stable anchor. You were denied external validation, and this denial became the necessary crucible for self-remembrance. Your soul, cut adrift from human approval, was forced to orient itself towards something greater: truth, courage, and justice. You were never meant to heal in isolation. What you are building is a legacy of health for the generations that follow. By refusing to carry the inherited dysfunction, you become the blueprint for a new way of being. Your peace does not depend on an apology from those who wounded you. Your peace is a self-generated virtue, an act of supreme agency. You have already walked through the fire and survived. What you have lived through did not disqualify you, it prepared you. The ultimate lesson, the key takeaway, is that your former pain is not an absence, but a presence. A highly refined awareness that now allows you to perceive and prevent similar suffering in the lives of others. Your journey of individuation, the process of becoming whole, has prepared you to be medicine for the world. Stop seeing yourself as the victim of a toxic past and begin to see yourself as the guardian of a virtuous future. This is your unique purpose. we have begun to build the fortress, brick by conscious brick, by reclaiming our story and setting our boundaries. The next chapter, a natural continuation of this path of inner mastery, is to examine how to maintain this fortress against the perpetual assaults of the external world. We must now turn our disciplined gaze toward the Stoic practice of negative visualization, the systematic contemplation of loss as the ultimate tool for preemptive psychological security and gratitude. This practice is not pessimism. It is a profound respect for the gravity of reality and a daily reminder that what we love is on loan, which grants every moment its true, vibrant value. Join me next as we explore this necessary discipline.